Welcome back to Franchisors.com, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, we are here for a very special episode. We are in our nation's capital right now. We are well past our halfway point, as Ryan alluded to on our previous podcast with Robert Crescente, the CEO of the IFA. We are on the 25th day, not on the 24th day. So really looking forward to talking with you guys today. I have a very special guest who has a wealth of knowledge in the franchise space with a very unique perception, mostly because he is not a franchisor, he is not a franchisee, he is not a supplier, but he does work for the IFA himself. And we have my very close friend and a mentor of mine, the Vice President of Development and Member Services, Mr. Paul Rocchio. Thank you for joining us, Paul.
Awesome. How are you, buddy?
Very good. Really looking forward to doing this. This was probably one of my most desired. You were one of the first people I called when we started doing this because I thought this would be a really awesome perspective. You have
it's been a blast following you guys around the country. It's been
really
fun.
It's really been an adventure, and
I got to actually see the damn RV, man. It's great.
I know, which is going to be great. It's really awesome, and 20 years of experience for you. You obviously have a very awesome and unique perspective in terms of franchising in general. And I think that where I want to start is because I know you've seen a lot of people really, really mess up, and I know you've seen a lot of people really, really succeed. Is there any recommendations that you have when you see a franchisor that really grows quickly? In terms of where they start with the first team member that you think that they should be trying to find, whether it's operations, whether it's finance, it's marketing, it's franchise development. Do you think there's really a silver bullet with that, or do you think it kind of depends?
It really depends because obviously, for any emerging startup or emerging franchisor, they really need to be royalty sufficient before they could start hiring people. At least this is just my perspective. Mm-hmm. So it's it's hard for them to spend money on a development person because really, I think personally, for any kind of startup franchisor, a lot of times, if conversations I've had with people over the years, the founder and CEO, that person will be the development person. They'll be the ops person. They'll do everything until they become royalty sufficient and start to grow and expand and have more money coming in that they could then start funding their franchise operations. And usually at that point, I always like to tell people it's always best to, at that point, hire a development person so you could remove yourself from that, and then and then ops. Those are the two things that kind of go, I think, hand in hand on the franchise side of things. Because as we all know, you could be a successful restaurateur, but then once you decide to start franchising, you're now a franchisor. You're wearing a different hat. Yeah, you still care about selling hamburgers or selling pizzas, but at the end of the day, you're in a totally different business. You're selling franchises, and then you're collecting that royalty from those franchisees, but you're also then keeping those franchisees happy, so they're successful and that their unit economics are strong and the whole nine yards. So you're in a different business. So until people realize that, there's a huge learning curve, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and you couldn't be more right. And I think that you touched on a lot of themes that we're definitely going to dive into later. Unit economics and things of that nature is something that we'll touch on a little bit throughout the rest of the episode here. But I think that's something that you definitely have seen a lot of people go wrong with, is not learning from their first group of franchisees. I know that you, being in that unique position that you're in, you see a lot of emerging brands coming in and out of the IFA, coming to the IFA convention for the first time, and you guide all of them because that's part of what you do here. And is there any recommendations that you have for them that when they see that first group of franchisees, is there anything that you've heard in the many panels that you've led that you think?
Well, it's interesting. Way back when I started, I used to, the term I always used to hear about as I started, kind of learning more about franchising and the business format franchise model was fogging the mirror.
Yeah.
People would always say, back in the day, if anybody would fog the mirror, just if they had a pulse, we would take their money. Yeah. But franchising is really, it's really changed over the years. It's become a very savvy business model, if you will, and especially on the franchisees being involved in franchising. They're very savvy business people, and it's also when you bring a franchisee kind of on board, you're really bringing them into your family, if you will. And it is. You want to make sure you're bringing the right person in, and that you're going to all be able to work together and work closely together. And you want to make sure that they're profitable. You want to make sure that it's the right fit for them. So I think if, though it might be maybe too conservative of a way of thinking, I think you really have to make sure you spend some quality time, just the right amount of time, whatever that, the definition is for the right amount of time, but that you're really getting the right people into your franchise.
Yeah.
Because you want to make sure that, you're all going to continue to be able to grow, and you're going to be involved in them. I mean, as the saying goes, the relationship between a franchisee and a franchisor lasts longer than most marriages.
Right.
It's true. And it's true. But it is really unique. I mean, I've seen franchises over the year expand and grow very quickly, and they also implode very quickly.
Yeah.
And then I've seen others that maybe grow too slowly.
Yeah.
And what's the right model? I mean, it's difficult because there's 100 different industries that franchise.
Yeah.
And though it's franchising is all the same. Whether you're flipping hamburgers, trying to fill hotel beds, or switching out mufflers, you're all dealing with the same issues. But at the end of the day, it's just. I mean, every industry is a little different, and.
Totally.
And some industries are open to a single unit mom and pop, where others are open to multiple units, and those are the folks that are usually very business savvy franchisees that could be operating lots of different systems, whether it's in restaurants and they want to diversify and have hotels, and in many cases they employ more people than the franchisor.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And, I think you're very right about that. And, another thing that I think that people will be interested in, because you do have, you're watching on the sidelines as all these people grow and some of them implode. And, you've seen a lot of brands come and go over your many years. And, I think that, my question to you is then when you are presenting that franchise opportunity, or when you are presenting your brand in the market to a consumer like you and me, have you seen there be any tools that you've really found to be helpful for a lot of brands over the course of your time?
Well, I mean, listen. Of course, I'm biased to IFA. Whenever anybody enters into franchising, or even if they're a very mature brand, we're a voluntary membership organization. But I like to think that the franchisors, franchisees, and suppliers, the three-legged stool of franchising. If you're involved in franchising, you really need to be a part of IFA. Mm-hmm. We promote, protect, and enhance franchising globally. So on the franchisor side, I always tell prospective franchisor members that by joining IFA, we're not a Better Business Bureau, or a government agency, but I like to think that because our members are expected to abide by and adhere to the IFA Code of Ethics, and our members are continually being educated on best practices to be the best franchisor they could be and continue to grow and steer their ship in the right direction. Mm-hmm. I tell our prospective members that by being a member of IFA, you're telling your existing franchisees or potential franchisees that you are, through IFA, learning to be and continuing to learn to be the best franchisor you could be. So it's a good selling point for them when they're dealing with potential franchisees or their existing
Absolutely.
franchisees.
And the other thing I was going to say, too, is a lot of the best ideas come out of networking at the IFA, too. And I think that's really what it brings. And, as somebody... I'm going to be biased too. For some reason decided to allow me to be in the membership committee, and for me, it's something that I constantly preach. It's more about the networking than anything else for me personally, but for other, it's different for everybody, right? I mean, I think that that's what's important. One thing that I know that I've heard a lot about at the conference is something that for the first time I actually heard at the IFA convention, my very first one, I think in 2015, was, about unit economics. I think that's when it really started to become on the scene. Why did the IFA feel that it was important for, the greater franchise community to know more about that? Because I feel like that's something that, for some odd reason, wasn't really talked about all that much until the past 5 years or so.
Well, as I kind of alluded to or mentioned earlier, franchising is truly a relationship business.
Yeah.
And franchisors have a vested interest in making sure that their franchisees are successful. The only reason why anybody wants to franchise their business, and this is just kind of my perspective, is they want to expand and grow using somebody else's capital.
Sure.
And one of the key essence, or the reason why somebody wants to become a franchisee or invest in a franchise, is because they want to invest in an existing business. The franchisor has already done all the homework. They've created a sound system. It's profitable. They've done all the legwork. So you're going into business for yourself, but not by yourself. So that's why why you would want to become a franchisee.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, for example, I've never operated or ran my own business.
Sure.
Do I think I'd be a good franchisee? Could I follow a system? Could I follow rules? Most definitely. I think I would be a good franchisee. Now, however, there's a lot of things I would need in terms of onboarding.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, for operating my own business, whatever that business might be, I want to make sure that I'm making money and that I'm profitable, and that's where the franchisor comes into play. The franchisor will help educate the franchisee, will help assist the franchisee. But of course, there's, and I'm not going to get into the government relations side, but, there's a big issue we're dealing with right now, joint employer. The current landscape, if you will, some franchisors are a little leery about helping and assisting their franchisees too much, because they don't want to, they're a little concerned about the whole joint employer issue. But at the end of the day, they do want to make sure that their franchisees are strong.
Everybody makes money, right?
Exactly, because that's how the franchisee makes more money, the franchisor makes more money, and everybody's happy.
Absolutely. And, one thing that I do want to touch on, because you guys do have a lot of events that really help people to understand more about how to run a franchise. And one in particular that I is coming up in September is, the Franchise Operations Summit in New Orleans. And I know there are a lot of initiatives and a lot of tools, and I'm sure that people talk about that the IFA feels is really important for people that are attending to understand. So is there, would you mind kind of going through, is there anything that you feel is kind of a recurring themes and things like that we're constantly trying to preach that people are actually
You mean specifically at our upcoming Ops Summit?
Yeah, just in general, what does the IFA feel is important for people to be doing in franchising from an operational standpoint?
That's an excellent question, and I'm actually attending the Ops conference this year for the first time. Now, actually, it's our second year. I did not go last year, and it's interesting. As within the franchising community, we all kind of have a pretty good read on the pulse, if you will, and obviously we noticed that this was a niche that needed to be filled, if you will, and my colleague Ann in our conferences department, she realized this, and so jump ahead, a couple of years now. This is the second year we're doing it, and I'll tell you, there's so many things from an operational standpoint that I think not only emerging, startup and emerging franchisors need to know about and learn about, but even mature franchise systems, they all need to have a better sense of how to better operate their franchise and how to better communicate that to their existing franchisees as well, because they want to make sure that they have that they're building their franchise house, if you will, on a sturdy foundation.
Sure.
And to do that, you need to have a good operations in place to cover every aspect of the franchise business.
Yeah, certainly. Another thing that I did want to touch on too, because it is actually directly after the Operations Summit, something that I know that you have a lot of connections in this particular part of the franchise industry, and that is, of course, I'm talking about the franchise development side of things, and I think that there are a lot of things that the IFA has the opportunity to kind of watch on the sidelines, what they feel works, what they feel doesn't work. And you guys obviously have control over the programming that goes on in those conferences. Is there, as somebody who has, been attending these conferences, whether it's the MFV trade shows or if it's, the own conferences you guys put on or some of the conferences that Franchisors.com
well, exactly.
does?
I always tell people, my job is to educate people who aren't very familiar with franchising. So I tell people there's I like to refer to it as the cottage industry that's built up around franchising. Obviously, I always tell people they need to join IFA. I educate them on IFA and everything that we do and provide to the franchising community. But then there's other things. There's the events that that you guys put on, whether it's Springboard or I guess the new conference, the Young Conference. There's also the Young Conference and Springboard and Young Conference I go to almost religiously. But then there's also Franchise Update. Franchise Update puts on a few very good conferences, and Franchise Update's a supplier member of IFA. We do we kind of partner with them. People who attend those conferences get CFE credits, Certified Franchise Executive credits. Their development conference is excellent. Their multi-unit conference is excellent. And so people, I educate people on that. And then also Franchise Times. They have the Restaurant Finance Leader.
Yeah.
Restaurant.
There's a lot of conferences, folks, so
RFDC.
excuse them. It's
Exactly.
tough to keep them
the
all straight.
acronyms in franchising are ridiculous. Just like the acronyms in the association world are here in DC. But so I tell everybody about all of these, including the MFE conferences as well. The consumer shows. But it's important for everybody to know about everything that's out there and available to them, because at the end of the day, it's all about education.
And that's where you learn.
We want to make sure that people involved in franchising have the education, have the resources, so they could learn, continue to grow in the right direction, because we all have vested interests in everybody involved in franchising to understand the best ways to go about expanding through the business format franchise model. So,
Absolutely. Another thing that I did want to just pivot and talk a little bit about culture, because I'm sure you've seen many of them over the course of time, and there's a lot of different brands that may have some good cultures, a lot of brands that you're like, yeah, they're not going to last because they don't have a culture at all. So is there anything that you've really seen, any particular culture, you don't necessarily need to call it the brand, but is there something that comes to mind to you that you think was interesting, that you thought worked really well, that maybe spread like wildfire in the industry?
Well, of course, being the head of membership here at IFA, and IFA being a membership organization, I would never call out one company over another, whether they're a member of IFA or a past member or a current member.
Have to be the utmost diplomatic. We are in DC.
Exactly right. It's all about trying to be PC at least. But at the end of the day, it all gets back to being in the association world. We only deal with people who are wanting to joiners, as I refer to them as joiners. If somebody's a joiner and wants to take advantage of a trade association and everything they could get out of it, and it depends on what they want to get out of it, then if somebody's a joiner, they will join IFA, they will learn everything they need to learn through IFA, and through the other folks that put on other conferences out there, like we had just discussed. And then I'm going to think that company, that person and that company will probably most likely be successful, okay? But if somebody is not a joiner and somebody thinks that they could just do this on their own, or when I get that phone call from somebody and they say, I'm looking for a template, I'm going to write my own FDD. Or I have my brother's an attorney, but he's not a franchise. But he's not a franchise
attorney.
Yeah, he's a divorce. He's a divorce attorney. I always tell people, kind of jokingly, but I tell people, franchising and specifically franchise law is very specific. Okay. And if if you have a brain tumor, you don't go to a podiatrist. Well, same thing. If you want to have an FDD drafted, you have to use a franchise attorney. You have to. And I always tell people, do not do this on your own, because there's 14 registration states. You have to make sure that you will get into trouble down the road if you try to draft your own FDD.
Sure.
So at the end of the day, I just think the brands that are successful for the most part are the people who will join IFA, but they will also take full advantage and build the relationships that they're going to get through IFA and through everything involved in this cottage industry that's built up around franchising to try to be as successful as they could possibly be. And those are the folks that are going to be successful.
Yeah, you learn about everything, from culture, franchise development tools, all of that from these things. One thing that the IFA does do as well that I know that may not necessarily touch what you do every day, but I know that being in DC and being in the office earlier than everybody else around here, I know that you do see it all the time. And I know we touched on it a little bit with Robert, but, is there anything that these people can do to learn more about, the threats to the business model that the IFA may offer that, would be beneficial for them to know about, maybe?
Well, definitely. And obviously, as a member of IFA, they will receive our monthly magazine. They will receive and have access to our smart briefs, our IFA Insider, the updates from our government relations department, they will be plugged into IFA. And we have a team, a government relations team of seasoned government relations professionals that are monitoring not just federal, regulatory, and state. I mean, that's everything that they're monitoring and staying on top of. So our members can continue to grow and thrive through the business format franchise model because they know that they've got Matt Haller and team here in D.C. taking care of and looking after everything at the federal, state, and regulatory side. And that if an issue comes up, they should be very comfortable that our government relations team will take care of that issue. But we always need to use our members for grassroots purposes because, as Tip O'Neill said, politics is local. So, we need to use people in Alabama or people in Florida or people in California or people in Virginia or wherever to come to DC or educate their state legislators or like I said, here in DC we have our big lobby day coming up, Franchise Action Network, which is why I was hired here 20 years ago. I was hired to build that. It was Franchise Appreciation Day back then. It's now Franchise Action Network, so it's kind of near and dear to my heart. But we need to bring our members in, and so they could educate the legislators. And,
Absolutely.
And so it's very important.
Totally.
Very important.
Yeah. And I know when I've alluded on this podcast a couple times that I interned here back in the day, and you were my boss, and as scary as that may have been back then, I know that was something that I really enjoyed, was getting.
You've come a long way, pal.
I know, I certainly have come a long way. But now I'm hosting. Now I'm on something called Franchisors.com. Pretty crazy, but yeah, it's been really great. In closing, Paul, I just wanted to go through with you. I'm sure you've seen a lot of people do a lot of things in the franchise space that have been questionable decision making, so to speak. Is there anything that you think that a brand should look out for when they're first getting started? Just one thing that you can think of that.
I'll tell you, it's again, caveat emptor. I mean, basically, there are so many people who love to pontificate in franchising. There are so many people who say they are experts in franchising, and what I always tell people is, whatever you need in franchising, I like to think that our members, whether it's a supplier or a franchisor or a franchisee, but if it's somebody who's thinking about investing in a franchise, come to IFA. If it's a franchisor who's looking for an attorney, a PR firm, a website, a development firm, anything, come to me and I'll help them. I mean, I just in the past week, I've helped a franchisee who's looking to diversify and expand their portfolio. I'm helping a franchisor who's looking for a printing company. I'm helping a supplier, expand and realize the value of their membership and maximize the value of their membership. So, at the end of the day, it's I like to think that anybody who's involved with IFA, is the best place to start, I think.
Absolutely. And where can people go to learn more about being a member of the IFA?
First place to start would be franchise.org. We list all of the staff on our website. People are more than welcome to reach out to me directly as well. They could call me or email me. My contact information is on franchise.org.
Absolutely, folks. And if you guys want to learn more, if you guys are an emerging brand that doesn't know very much about the IFA, feel free to reach out to Ryan, myself. You have Paul, and there are many others that are very heavily invested in the Franchisors.com that are more than happy to talk with you about that. Paul, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of our very special IFA edition episode here at Franchisors.com. Thanks again, and talk to you soon.
You bet.